Hello, this is Rocky Marciano. When I was heavyweight champion of the world, they called me the Brockton Blockbuster. You find out why.
Welcome to the Rocky Marciano Archives, a channel dedicated to the life and career of the immortal champion. In this installment of Rocky's story, we travel back to 1946. The future champion is fulfilling the terms of his enlistment into the U.S. Army at Fort Lewis, Washington, helping time pass by, joining both the camp's baseball and boxing squads. Again, the following is an abridged reading from the Archive's own John Cameron's biography, Redemption, The Life of Rocky Marciano, Volume 1, 1923 through 1949. We hope you get something out of this. Before we continue, if you enjoy the content of this channel, then hit the like and subscribe buttons. It costs you absolutely nothing but helps this channel towards its aim of celebrating the life of the immortal champion in so many ways. Thank you for your support. Now on with the show. In later years, Rocky would recall his first official boxing match for Fort Lewis. The guy I was fighting dressed in the same room with me. He was talking in a loud voice about how he was a pro and what he was going to do to me. He didn't scare me because I knew I was in good enough condition so he couldn't hurt me. But I knew I could lose, and I wondered what it would feel like to lose in front of all those people. We got out into the ring and this other guy was warming up in his corner, shadow boxing and everything. We boxed 3 rounds. I didn't knock the other guy out, but I won the decision. The Post newspaper wrote it up, and for the first time in my life I saw my name in print as a boxer. Between May and early August, Marciano would participate in 5 official inter-service bouts, winning 4 and losing 1 before being picked, under the tutelage of Lieutenant George Bud Hanson and Master Sergeant Alexander Hendricks, for the Amateur Athletic Union's Junior National Finals in Portland, Oregon. Rocky's inclusion in the tourney after such a seemingly short campaign was due in part to one Herman DeVault, then a member of the Oregon AAU Boxing Committee. He had made a trip to Fort Lewis to see then-champion Joe Louis in yet another exhibition, and happened upon this, in his own words, awkward kid. He won his fights with one-punch left-hand roundhouse knockout swings, after clowning on the ropes, sticking out his chin, and letting the other fellow hit it. Still, he was suitably moved enough to recommend this fighter be a representative of the impressive Fort Lewis squad. For Marciano, the only heavyweight from amongst 11 fighters was, on paper at least, by far the least experienced in a team made up of former Golden Glove winners, plus one featherweight by the name of Sammy Butera, who had competed in no less than 105 amateur bouts, losing only 2. The tournament itself was to be held over 3 days beginning Wednesday, August 21st, and culminating on the 24th. This, however, would bring forth an unforeseen decision for Marciano, one that he never dreamt he would be forced to make. At the same time, his beloved baseball team, in which he had proved popular at first base, had qualified to play in the AAU finals held in Tacoma, Washington. Rocky wrestled with the final verdict before making his decision. I decided to go to Portland. It was the first time I'd ever picked boxing over baseball when I had a choice. Many believe that the championships in Portland, held upon the site of a former Chinese vegetable garden, but by now transformed into the impressive oval-shaped Multnomah Civic Stadium, an outdoor arena, the first time such an event had been staged in the open air, to be the best represented tournament in AAU history, with well over 100 boxers representing both the services and private clubs from as far afield as Texas to Canada. Marciano's first fight in the tournament would take place on the second day of competition against one Frederick L. Ross, whom he disposed of inside the very first minute, with, according to John Pinsatish, lead sports writer for the Oregonian, on the morning of Friday the 23rd of August, 1946, an overhand right that would make a Mack truck stop and think again. For decades afterwards, the aforementioned Ross would never figure out how he lost. Whilst stationed in England with the American Air Force in 1963, the then Captain Ross vividly recalled to British journalist John Kruger his encounter with the future heavyweight champion of the world. His ire was aroused against Marciano, wrote Kruger, when the future champ showed up in his corner wearing a silly little cap. Ross resented this because to him, boxing was a serious business. He felt extremely confident as he waited for the bell. With no sweat, his first jab landed good, followed by a testing right cross. Then he went right in and powered home his best punch, but Rocky just grunted and came right back. A shower of Ross blows drove Marciano clear across the ring. I was dumbfounded when he didn't go down. With my last one, I just teed off from the toes. It drove him into the ropes. I thought he was done. I dropped both hands to get the most power and knock his head out into the ringside. However, this last flurry was only leading to Ross's downfall, as other fighters were to later discover. You either became overconfident and off your guard when you found you could hit him so freely, or you completely lost your confidence when you discovered your best punches weren't hurting him, said Ross. I hit him with everything I had, and I was following up for what I thought would be the kill when I got it. I didn't come to my senses until 2 hours later when I was walking down the street with my dad. This demolition of the previously unbeaten Ross led Rocky into the semi-final the following day. It is conjecture as to whether Marciano stayed to watch the remaining bouts that evening in the ring that had been erected in midfield, flanked by chairs and bleachers, or if he returned to Swan Island Barracks, the temporary berths for all competitors that week. His opponent the next night in this, for him, penultimate fight of the tournament, one Richard Jarvis, again folded within the very first stanza when Rocky landed a thunderous left hand to his opponent's jaw after Jarvis had decided to trade blow for blow with him in the middle of the ring. However, as that left punch landed, a terrific pain laced through his clenched fist and shot straight up his arm. As Marciano admitted later, I didn't know how to punch right, and I broke the knuckle on the forefinger of my left hand. The bone was jammed almost up into my wrist. It was an horrific injury, but one that he was at first reticent to tell either Hansen or Master Sergeant Hendricks, at least until after the final, for fear that they would pull him from the tournament. The injury was soon discovered, however, when Hendricks was preparing his hands for taping. Rocky pleaded with his trainer to allow him to fight. In actuality, at least according to Herman DeVault again, who was there throughout, Rocky became so emotional over the thought that he may not get a chance to compete in the final that he cried in the dressing room before he went into the ring. Ask Sam Jacobs, who was his second. He wept like a baby. Despite his initial concerns, Hendricks, perhaps inspired by Marciano's alleged display of despair, relented and, in order to help his fighter, as Rocky recalled, sprayed something that looked like Free Zone on my hand. It turned all the hairs white and then the hand was frozen. Thus the fighter entered the final bout later on that very same night. He was going against the 6'3" Joe DeAngelis, who had been crowned the New England Golden Gloves heavyweight champion in 1944. This was not their first meeting, for as DeAngelis later recalled, they had been informally introduced earlier in the tournament when he was with two of his teammates. The first night there, we were having supper in the cafeteria of the former Kaiser shipyards when the Army group came in and a blocky, aggressive fellow came over, introduced himself, and asked if we were from Boston. We said we were. Rocky looked at me and remarked, "You must be Joe DeAngelis. I've been reading about you. You're good. You'll make the finals here, and when you do, I'm going to stiffen you." DeAngelis continued to describe his bout with the untamed Marciano. When we received instructions in the middle of the ring, I got a chance to size Rocky up real close. He was the most solid, hard, muscular man I had ever seen, yet his hands were like lightning. When the bell rang, he charged at me, his head lowered like a bull, swinging those looping left and right hands, boring in all the time. I held him off with lefts, saw a good opening for a right, and belted him square on the jaw as hard as I've ever hit anyone. He didn't even shake his head. Later in the round, I got him with a few more good shots, which he ignored. I've knocked out a lot of men in my day, but never hit anyone so often and as hard as Rocky, but with no result. Hitting him was like hitting the side of a rhino. I was afraid I would break my hand. Rocky kept coming and swinging with everything he had. I kept moving and trying to time his rush, let go a few punches, and then move again. Midway through the second round, after Rocky had missed a series of punches, someone at ringside razzed him. Rocky was enraged. He walked over to the edge of the ropes and yelled down, "If you can do any better, come up here. The kid won't stand still." Rocky was really mad. He had counted on a quick KO. He was over-anxious and was making mistakes. Those in the audience, who had at first been cheering for the destructive soldier, were now changing their allegiance to the flashier DeAngelis. "It was a hell of a lousy feeling," Rocky would confide later. "I think they figured I was throwing the fight." DeAngelis continued. "The third round was the wildest. Knowing how hard Rocky could punch, I was very careful. I knew I had the fight won, I just couldn't make a mistake. Then Mickey, McGuire, DeAngelis' second, yells, 15 seconds, Joe, you won. Then bam, bam. Those bam-bams were the final two punches thrown by Marciano, knocking DeAngelis cold. To the amazement and bewilderment of the stunned crowd, it was to be the unconscious man's hand, which would be raised in victory. Rocky's last-ditch attempt to rescue the fight had been futile by a mere second when the bell rang, thus ending both the bout and the count. The losing fighter was gobsmacked by the decision. Some believed that Marciano was in fact disqualified for hitting after the bell. As he sat disconsolate in his dressing room after the fight, nursing his injured left hand, he contemplated giving up the sport altogether then and there. "I told him not to do that," DeAngelis claimed. "Sure, I beat him over 3 rounds, but there's not many out there who could beat him over 6, 10, or even 15. Herman DeVault would continue with his recollections of the then amateur Marciano in an article from the Oregonian in 1951. "I talked with Marciano quite a bit throughout the tournament as he was waiting to go on or watching other fights. 'What do I care about the next fight?' he'd say. 'I'll knock him out.' And he did. After the tournament, he said he wanted to go pro and asked me to manage him. I have to laugh at how I kissed goodbye to the probable next champion. 'You'll never get anywhere. You're too awkward and too much of a clown,' I told him. So now I run a ranch house and someone else is the champ's manager." This was to be Rocky's last hurrah for Fort Lewis. He would never step inside the ropes for them again. His injured hand saw to that. The dislocation to his knuckle saw to it, too, that he would spend the ensuing weeks undergoing a pioneering new treatment for his damaged hand, a treatment he would later credit for saving his career. Thank you for listening. Join us again next time as we continue to explore the remarkable life and career of an extraordinary man.